In the past several episodes of History Traveler, we've been talking about the Battle of Arras that took place in April and May of 1917. As I mentioned in the very first episode in this series, the Battle of Arras is a violent battle that has kind of been overlooked. You have Passchendaele to the north, you have the Somme to the south, and in between those two, both figuratively and literally, is Arras. Those two battles, Passchendaele and Somme, were known for their violence and for their brutality. But the Battle of Arras has more deaths per day than either one of these battles. And the focus that we've had has largely been on the ground. But there was also a war that was happening in the air and above the clouds. And April during 1917 for the Royal Flying Corps was known as Bloody April. So right now I am in Achille-le-Grand Communal Cemetery, and as I'm looking around, I'm seeing a lot of graves from August of 1918. So many of the people buried here would have died during the spring offensive in 1918. But there are a lot of men who were airmen who are buried here. World War I is kind of the dawn of combat aviation, and I cannot even imagine being one of the pilots who was kind of, pardon the expression, at the ground level of combat aviation in the First World War. And we're going to be going up to the Arras Cemetery to look at a monument here in just a little while. But there is one reason why I wanted to come to this particular cemetery today. Something that is different in this cemetery from some of the other Commonwealth cemeteries that we've seen. It's not unique to just this one. You see this in others. But we have some German graves here among the Commonwealth graves. Looks like most of these are men who died in the 1918 Spring German offensive. And as we move and look at some of these others, well, here's one to an Ian Gilmore Cameron, who was with the Cameron Highlanders, and as you can see, also in the Royal Flying Corps. 9th of November 1916, at the age of 19, he died, and his epitaph says, "A glorious death." Here's another one, a man named Reginald Smith, who was in the Royal Flying Corps. So during World War I, you see a lot of men who start off in artillery or infantry and then make the transition to the Royal Flying Corps. Here's another one, a major by the name of Robert Egerton, died in December of 1917, started off in the Royal Irish Fusiliers. Here's another Flying Corps. But the one that I came to see today was this one right here. This is the grave of GWA Green, who started off in the Royal Field Artillery and was also in the Royal Flying Corps. And he died on the 8th of March, 1918, at the age of 24. And the reason that I wanted to see his grave and pay a visit here today is because recently I came into possession of some of the belongings of GWA Green. What we are looking at right now is a copy of a notice that was posted in a newspaper entitled "Native Son Gives Life in Service." This is announcing the death of Jeffrey Walter Ashdown Green of the Royal Flying Corps, killed on March 8th. And it says, Lieutenant Jeffrey W. Ashdown Green, youngest son of Mr. and Mrs. Ashdown Green, it tells the address, was killed on March 8th while serving with the 59th Squadron of the Royal Flying Corps, according to a brief communication which came to the parents on Monday. And then it talks about how he was 24 years old and he had started off in the Honorable Artillery Company and then started training the February prior to his death, and was acting as an observer when last heard from. And it says it is assumed that he was serving in this way when he met his death. So this is a copy of the newspaper article that came with the things that I have in my possession now. And this right here that we are looking at on the right is a cap badge for the Royal Flying Corps, and then on the left is a British War Medal. It has the image of George V on it, and if we were to look closely, it'll be hard to see right here, but on the edge is inscribed the name of Jeffrey Green. Now, in addition to these two things, we also get to have a more personal look at the service of Green, because he also brought with him to war a camera. And in this album are photos that he had taken at home. And as we progress through the album, you can see, I'm assuming, friends and family from back home. Continuing on here we see some military figures on parade. Now there's no date or description that is attached to these. And then here's what I'm assuming is them setting off across the English Channel. More pictures of family. And then we start seeing images from the First World War. Here this says Dad, so I'm wondering if he maybe left a young son behind who made a notation there later. So let's zoom in on that real quick, because that might be Jeffrey Green who we are looking at. But here you see some of his buddies. Here is a downed plane. And then an image of a church here. I was so pleased to come into possession of this, not only to be its caretaker, but also because it's so rare to be able to connect such personal items to a name on a headstone. We're going to hop back into the car and head up to the large Commonwealth Cemetery in Arras, where they also have a memorial to the Royal Flying Corps. This is where we are going to wrap up our time in Arras, and I have a few other things that I brought with me that I want to show at this cemetery. We have now moved into the city of Arras at the Falberg Military Cemetery and the Arras Memorial here behind us. Now, we've already visited the memorial, but we didn't spend any time in the cemetery in that prior episode. So got a few things that we're going to look at here before we leave. Connected with the first grave that we visited today, I wanted to visit this memorial right here. This is the Arras Flying Services Memorial. Now, like I mentioned at the last site, the Royal Flying Corps really had it bad during the Battle of Arras. April was nicknamed Bloody April. Frankly, the Germans had superior aircraft to the British and were just chewing these poor guys up. So anyway, the Arras Flying Services Memorial here commemorates the nearly 1,000 airmen from the Royal Naval Air Service and the Royal Flying Corps and let's see what else, the Australian Flying Corps, Royal Air Force, who were killed on the Western Front and have no known grave. In a prior episode, we came here to the Aras Memorial to the missing. This is a memorial that has the name of around 35,000 soldiers etched in stone who have no known grave. So for the families, they could come here and they could, even though there was no grave, they could have a place where they could come and see the name of their loved one. But at home, they had something else to remember their loved one by. The government would send them a plaque like this. Here on this section of the wall for the Royal Fusiliers, well, there are a lot of men with the last name White, and there in the middle you can see the name L. White. This is for a man who was in the Royal Fusiliers by the name of Leon White. And I have with me a memorial plaque that was sent to his family. So there, etched into the metal, you can see the name Leon White. Here at the top it says he died for freedom and honor. So this is something that would be sent to the families so that they could remember their loved one. Sometimes these are called a death plaque. I've also seen them called a death penny. And then also with me today, I brought a few of the medals of Leon White. So this one here on the left is his British Service Medal, and then we have a World War I Victory Medal. And then on the edges, we have the serial number and name of Leon White etched into it. So here are a few of the items from Leon White, who was killed here in the area of Arras, right by where his name is. Now, adjacent to the Arras Memorial is the Falberg d'Amiens military cemetery. And you may hear a little bit of noise behind me today. There's a school group that just showed up to this cemetery, which I think is awesome. If you are an adult or if you're a teacher or something like that, I think you should bring your kids to places like this. But anyway, when the British took over this sector from the French in March of 1916, this cemetery was established. So you have a lot of men who are being injured on the front, and they would be brought back to field hospitals and such, and those who died were buried right here in this cemetery. I think there's like 2,650 graves here in this cemetery, and walking around you really get kind of a survey of all of the different regiments that came through the Arras sector. Here's the grave of a man named F.J. Lamet, who was with the Northumberland Fusiliers, died at the age of 32. And we talked about the Northumberland Fusiliers a little bit in a prior video, and then here you can see the epitaph down at the bottom with this religious message that says, "They shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads," from Revelation 22:4. So again, a lot of families taking comfort in the midst of tragedy by leaning on their faith. And if we look over here, well, here's another German grave that is placed between these British graves. But there's one here that I want to point out that is really, really different. And that is this one right here. You see that the shape of the stone is a little bit different, and it says an unidentified soldier, Imperial Russian Army, 18th of February 1917. And you might be thinking, what in the heck is a soldier from the Russian Army doing all the way out here on the Western Front? Well, I was listening to Paul Reed's podcast, and he actually explained it. The Russians had been put into forced labor, the Russian POWs rather, had been used as forced labor by the Germans over here to help build the Hindenburg Line. And there were a couple of guys who escaped and got out of the trenches. They were making their way over to the British lines, and when a British soldier called out to see who was there and ask for like a password or something, well, they answered in Russian. The guy thought it was German, and he cut down on him. Wounded the other guy and killed this one. So here in this cemetery, you have a Russian soldier, of all things. I mentioned how there is a plot of Germans who are buried together. Well, here is the German section, I guess you could say, of the cemetery. And if we walk over here, I just walked by this, didn't know that it was here, but found it interesting. Here by themselves are 3 graves, and as you can see, it says the following Hindu soldier of the Indian Army is honored here. This one is Ram Sharand, Royal Field Artillery, 28th of February 1919 is when he was killed. Huh. So that's one of 2 things. That's either Spanish flu, or maybe he was killed in the post-war clearance of the battlefield. I've heard of soldiers who, were cleaning up the battlefields, getting unexploded ordnance out, and died in that way. And yeah, here's a guy on the 10th of February 1919. Yeah, so these are men who died after the armistice. Well, dang, we just keep finding interesting graves here. Here are 5 graves. Again, you can see that the writing on them is not English. It looks like they also died after the armistice, November 26, 1918, December of 1918. So again, this could be Spanish flu, it could be a number of different things. Could be vehicle accident, who knows? These are things that we will have to look up. And then over here, I found yet another one. to a Sikh soldier of the Indian Army. It says Arjun Singh, 6th Cavalry, Indian Army, died the 4th of August, 1916. So yeah, here in this cemetery, you're really looking at a broad range of nationalities represented. Well, here at the cemetery, there's just one more grave that I was wanting to visit before I left. It's that of Private J. Keith. You can see he was with the King's Own Scottish Borderers and died during the first week of the Battle of Arras. Died on the 16th of April, 1917, at the age of 25. And with me today, well, I have the British Service Medal of J. Keith. So there you can see the image of King George V, and Keith's name is inscribed on the side of the medal, just like all of the others. And then down at the bottom, you can see the hope that his parents had, that they would meet their son again at Jesus' feet. All right, well, that is going to wrap up our time here in Arras. As I've already mentioned a few times, this is a battle that has kind of been almost forgotten, definitely overlooked, especially when compared to Passchendaele and the Somme. But I would encourage you to learn more about this battle, because we only scratched the surface. Get some books, pick a regiment, and kind of follow their path. And it'll give you a greater appreciation for what these men did in the spring of 1917.